Come with us to Colonial Williamsburg, home of the American Revolution, ghost tours, and college life. Hey folks, welcome back to Not Just in Orlando, where we explore the best spots to sip, snack, and sometimes get slightly spooked across the U.S. Today we're going back in time, and I don't mean just skipping lunch. We're heading to Colonial Williamsburg, Virginia's living history museum that lets you walk straight into the 18th century. So dust off your petticoats and powdered wigs because this one's gonna be a ride. So let's set the scene. You're strolling down Duke of Gloucester Street. There are no traffic lights, just horse-drawn carriages. Every building looks like it belongs in a Hamilton set design. This isn't a reenactment weekend. This is daily life in Colonial Williamsburg. Colonial Williamsburg is a living history town that recreates life from about 1699 to 1780, when Williamsburg was Virginia's capital and one of the most politically charged cities during the lead-up to the American Revolution. You'll see blacksmiths forging real iron, women making thread on spinning wheels, and yes, actors in character debating liberty, taxes, and the tyranny of King George like it's 1775 and things are getting heated. And it's not just for show. Many of these interpreters are actual historians. They research their characters and the real events they portray. You're not just seeing a costume, you're seeing a story unfold. All right, let's talk food. Because while I admire Thomas Jefferson's politics, I also admire a good colonial ale and a turkey leg, hard same. So there are a few places inside Colonial Williamsburg that serve historic fare, but one of our favorites is Christiana Campbell's Tavern. George Washington used to dine there, and I see why. The crab cakes, revolutionary. You'll get period authentic recipes served by candlelight, with servers speaking just old-timey enough that you won't feel like you're in a Renaissance fair. Also hit up King's Arms Tavern for peanut soup, game pie, and roasted duck. And if you want to step outside the historic bubble, walk over to Dog Street Pub, a British gastropub with craft beer that's much better than anything our founding fathers ever had. And of course, we grabbed a drink at Amberock's Public House, local brews, cozy vibes, and it's the kind of place where you can end your night debating Enlightenment philosophy or just how good the mac and cheese is. One thing that surprised me, the Colonial Marketplace. You're not just looking at old-timey wares, you can buy them, handmade soaps, leather goods, bonnets, quills. Yeah, I now own a feather quill I have absolutely no idea how to use, but I felt very powerful buying it. They also have seasonal events like the farmers market, where modern vendors set up alongside colonial era ones. It's the only place I've seen where someone's selling candied pecans next to a coopering demonstration. Okay, we have to talk about the ghost tour. Yes, Colonial Williamsburg is supposedly one of the most haunted places on the East Coast. We did the official Colonial Ghost Tour, and let's just say I did not sleep well that night. Between the Peyton Randolph House, which is believed to be cursed, and the whispers from the Bruton Parish Church Cemetery, I swear something tugged my coat. I'm blaming ghosts, not low-hanging tree branches. These tours are great because they blend real historical tragedies with spooky folklore. You learn about epidemics, war, disappearances, and how the past sometimes refuses to stay buried. And for those keeping score, I jumped twice, you scream once, and at least one ghost probably rolled its eyes at us. So let's get nerdy. Williamsburg was a hotbed of revolutionary thought. Big names like Thomas Jefferson, Patrick Henry, and George Wythe walked these streets plotting against British rule. And if you visit the Capitol, you'll hear reenacted debates that led up to the Declaration of Independence. They reenact full sessions where tensions were so high, you could practically smell the treason. The governor's palace is another must-see, fancy, opulent, and when you see that wall of swords and muskets in the entryway, you understand colonial intimidation tactics. I loved how many exhibits dive into the daily life of enslaved and free Black Americans during that time too. It's not sanitized history. They're telling the full story of early America. If you time it right, Williamsburg goes big on festivals. There's grand illumination in December, Fireworks, music, and thousands of candles lighting up the town. Spring brings Revolutionary City, which is part immersive theater, part epic flashback. You walk right into protests, spy plots, and political showdowns. And don't forget Busch Gardens is like 15 minutes away if you want to end your historical journey with a roller coaster. All right, time for some colonial tips for our listeners.
I don't know, this is my third coffee today, and honestly,
applaud Mistress Lucy. Mistress Lucy, democracy comes from two Greek words. Demos, which means many, kratos, which means power. So, in that definition, democracy means many have the... But if many have the power, does that make it a better mode of government than if the power should reside in one person? Not necessarily. One man can be a tyrant just as easily as a group of people can become a mob. Is that not true? Yet democracy brings a unique opportunity. Self-government, if a people are worthy enough to govern themselves. In a monarchy, only one individual must govern themselves. Keep a practicum of their virtues, their enlightened principles. In a democratic experiment, everyone must. Which is why, Mistress Lucy, when you look to the history of the world, whether it is this present moment in North America, whether it is all the way back to its inception, 444 BC in ancient Greece, you see systems of government born pure. Inevitably, we lose ourselves to the will of the mob. I've often written that if every Athenian were a Socrates, it still would have ended as a mob. In fact, the term democracy has become so unpopular throughout the world that it has become the common consensus in Europe, which calls itself the pattern of civilization, that people need kings. That kings and kings alone should be the sole arbiters of the affairs of men, but my dear friends, no longer in America. No, through the course of this decade, we have endeavored to prove history wrong. A bloody war was fought in pursuit of this singular opportunity. Our war for independence.
First, get the multi-day pass. One day isn't enough if you want to do the full dive into history, food, and ghost stuff. Second, talk to the interpreters. Ask weird questions. They love it. I asked one what their favorite 1700s insult was, and she said, "You bootless scullion." I still don't know what that means, but I'm offended. And third, bring comfy shoes. The streets are authentic, which means cobblestones, uneven bricks, and lots of walking. And trivia time. Did you know that Colonial Williamsburg was restored in the 1930s thanks to funding from John D. Rockefeller Jr.? He visited, loved it, and basically wrote a blank check to rebuild it brick by brick. We love a billionaire history nerd. So whether you're a history buff, a foodie, or just someone who likes yelling huzzah without judgment, Colonial Williamsburg has something for you. Thanks for tagging along on this time-traveling adventure. Be sure to like, subscribe, and share the pod with your favorite fellow patriot. And remember, if someone tries to tax your tea without representation, throw it in the harbor and grab a beer instead. See you next time.
It's not as dark as it may seem. It's a full moon. But Colonial Williamsburg and Liberty Square could never. But it's 8 o'clock and the chimes just went off. And it's a pretty nice Friday evening. So we'll carry on. There's some ghost tours, but I've already been on one, and I've read so much about the place that I could probably lead some of these and make $25 for a 90-minute session per person. But in the evening, it gets pretty chilly, so I'm gonna do one lap walking and then probably 3 miles of running and call it a night. is a tour going on, and it's going to stop right in front of the courthouse. And it's still fairly early here in Colonial Williamsburg, the original capital of Virginia. And people are doing their nightly runs. It's Parents' Weekend, apparently, so there's a lot of additional tourists that there usually is not during the evening. Usually during the nighttime, there's nobody wandering these streets except for the runners or paid ghost tours. But tonight is quite busy. Oh no, you're fine.